quarantine, day 253, because that's real life. It's November 20th, 2020, and I came back to say some things. So I'm doing race equity work right now on a bunch of different platforms, and I'm tired all the time, and I'm not going to go into a lot of it because I don't know how much of it I'm allowed to go into and in what spaces. That said, in one of our trainings, we were discussing implicit bias, and initially we were discussing internalized racial oppression, right? So we're internalized racial superiority and internalized racial inferiority, and the way in which white supremacy impacts all people living underneath it in dehumanizing ways. And so we get to implicit bias in this training, and this woman speaks up, and she's a doctor of social psychology, and she tells us about this this study that has been done. And in the study, she's talking about how they were like, I don't really know the ins and outs of it, but basically like they were monitoring, mapping people's brains and the parts of the brain that lit up when they were shown images, right, to kind of map implicit bias and how that works out. And she says very casually, oh, and this isn't about race, but it is about homelessness, which I figure, you know, that really matters in this space because, right, it's a bunch of homeless service providers and some folks who used to experience homelessness. Hi. And she says, when people were shown images of people experiencing homelessness, the part of their brain that lit up was the part associated with disgust, and was the same part of the brain that lit up when shown images of toilets and vomit. And then I had a little bit of a breakdown, and I had a friend in the room that, like, I thought I was being cool, right? Because I got my glasses on. You can't really see. I'll cry. My face isn't red. I'm not making faces. And my friend messages me in the chat, and she's like, hey, are you all right? And I was like, shit, do I look like I'm crying? I got to leave for a minute. And I stepped away for a minute because I needed to. And then I went out to my porch to smoke a cigarette and talk to my husband and cry about how in that moment that she said that when people see images of people experiencing homelessness, the part of their brain that lights up is the one associated with disgust and associated with toilets and vomit. 3 sentences, right? And suddenly I can smell the heat coming off of the sidewalk on the drag, and I can feel the church step underneath me, and I can like feel, I could feel it. It was a sensory experience of being like back on the street and being like a homeless kid and being like what I thought was unseen, right? I thought people just wanted to ignore us. Like I thought we were just being ignored, but I knew it didn't feel quite like being ignored because, you know, people get ignored. But like realizing that when people were seeing us, me, they were seeing objects of disgust. They weren't seeing humanity, and they weren't seeing the human on the side of the road, right? They were seeing objects of disgust. And it's been a wild trip since then for me, right? This thinking through like all of this journey and this time that I've spent, and anyone who watches this that's been like friends with me, because that's probably the only people who will watch this, know like how much time and energy and effort and money and work I have put into myself, and I have put into who I am and who am I, and my identity and my worth and my value, and do I have any at all? And I guess my question is, how do you come back from that? How does anyone come back from ongoing dehumanization and ongoing experience of the world never being allowed to be a person, right? And how do we ask people to do that? How do we ask people who go through it every day in our culture of being not just unseen, not just invisible, but being seen as garbage, being seen as toilets and vomit, and how can we ask these people to integrate back into a society that could at any point in time see them as less than a human being? But what's more, when we talk about self-worth and we talk about, you know, healing from trauma, and like the first steps of healing from trauma are like loving yourself and knowing that you're worth it. But yeah, like when your trauma is not even being able to like know the experience of worth as a human, right? How are you supposed to like claw your way back, right? And like, I mean, I've done it, right? In some ways, I'm in a different world today than I was even before, even on day 22 of this fucking pandemic, right? Of this quarantine. There's been so much growth and crazy shit I can't even get into right now. But it's like, we have to like, how can we, and we got to do better, right? Like we got to, like as a culture, as a community, because that's what it is about, right? Too, is community. But, you know, I get lauded in all these spaces for all this shit I've done, and I'm so amazing, and I used to be a street kid, and like, oh my God, look at what you've done, and you went from homeless to homeowner, and all of this shit, and people think it's just the most amazing story, and I'm so incredible, and I'm so all of these things. But all of these things that make me incredible to these people is that I was like on the street and I'm not anymore. And half of them want to use me to like show how pulling yourself up by the bootstraps works. So I do have a message for anyone who thinks that about me. I didn't come up pulling myself up by bootstraps. I didn't even have boots. And in fact, those who knew me back then know I didn't even have shoes for like 2 years. I was barefoot. You can see it. There is evidence of it in the cracks in my soles. And I'm going to tell you right now, I came up because there was community. I came up because maybe, yeah, sure, I built some community. I found some people. I got cut off because I got a text message. Welcome to 2020. All I'm saying is I came up because there was a community of support around me. Like, when we come back up, and when we come up in any way, we come up because of the community around us, because we build it, because we work to it. You know, I said in October, and all these people putting all your faith in this establishment, and you better vote for this person, and you better do this, you better do that. Like, you got to stop having faith in the establishment. The establishment is not how I came up. I didn't come up because of systems and structures. I came up because of, well, the broader systems and structures, right? I came up because of the closely knit, built system and structure of humans in my life that had my back, right? And like that's how we come up, right? We come up with support and care and love. We take care of each other. And when we're nurses, we nurse people at home. And when we're teachers, we teach. And when we can provide to our community, we all have something to provide to our community, right? Like, we've all got that. But what we don't have are like our counter institutions and our mutual aid networks and our networks of people. And we got to be building them, because all this like near to fascism, or actual fascism, if you ask me, that we've been dealing with, all of these things, like community beats capitalism. My friend Marty and I had a long talk about this, and they're like on point with this 3-sentence word: community beats capitalism. Sorry, 3-word sentence. And it's legitimate and real, and community helps you come up, and community helps you stay alive. And you got to stop all this like lauding or using as an example. It's not just, and it's not right. And I won't be your example of how somebody can just like pull themselves up by their bootstraps, right? Because the other thing I learned this summer, and that it's conflicting in my brain right now, right, is that I'm so much more than I used to be homeless. I'm so much more than that. I bring so much more value into the spaces that I walk into than I have this history and this expertise and this life that I used to live, right? Like, I haven't been in that lifetime in 15 years. And it's the thing that I'm branded with. And there are people who say, well, I lead with it, but it's like, it's interesting too, because in the spaces I'm in and where I'm trying to come up in my life, it's like, I have to lead with it. Not because I want to, but because that's how the system is designed. And so that's how I get my foot in the door to do the other shit I'm trying to do. And I don't even know what the point of all of this is. I guess it's to show you that on day 252 of quarantine, your girl has lost it. And maybe gained some shit too. I don't know. But it's day 252 of quarantine. The holidays are next week. Starting next week. And I miss people, so I'm just putting this out there. Y'all can listen to it or you can't. So that's okay too, you know? But just hold space for the fact that when people look at homeless people, they see toilets and vomit. And remember that, like, engage in a relationship. At least just see somebody, right? And if you want to end homelessness in your community, I'm your girl. Come talk to me. Like, I know how, I don't know how, but I mean, I know where to start at least, right? Like, I can give you some ins to the network, but just like, we got to do better. We got to do more. We can't just sit around and be like, okay with Save Austin Now and trying to like rug sweep and eradicate and disappear humanity. Like, you know, when I was on the street in Austin, I was a citizen of Austin. I was a neighbor in Austin. I was a friend and a poet and a big sister and Mama Ree and you know, a daughter and I shouldn't have to be any of those things for this community to have seen me as a human. And they didn't want to. And so they didn't. And, you know, I've had to come back from that somehow. And some days I haven't, and some days I have. But if you are seeing this and you don't know, you haven't connected to, or you haven't had the experience of not being seen as like a human, the feeling of knowing what people I can't explain it to you. It smells like hot sidewalk. It feels like thirst. It looks like a human. Because it is one. So, those are my thoughts on day 252 of quarantine. 252. Okay.